really good advice for young guys working for a boss. And a couple of the key points he made was don't compete with your boss. That's not the point. So if you're competing with them for, in Truett in his case was speaking engagements, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, again, that causes friction. And his advice is also do the things your boss doesn't like to do. So if you can find stuff that your boss just really doesn't like, that doesn't get done because he hates doing it, maybe that's the area that you could really make a difference in.
Bootstrapped Unicorns. It's Josh Pies. I am the host of Bootstrapped Unicorns, and I'm excited today because my friend Barry is here. And who's Barry? Well, you're going to find out a lot about him, but he happens to be the CEO and owner of Wilson & Co. General Contractors. Now, you may think you know general contractors, and I suppose if you're in the industry, you might, but most people actually don't understand the difference between a general contractor who does commercial and a general contractor who does residential. And there's an interesting juxtaposition there. And then we're going to talk a lot about how Barry got into the business and the difference between Wilson & Co. and all the other guys, because there's a difference. I've seen it, I've experienced it, I know it, and I think you'll appreciate learning their philosophies about how they run their business. So without further ado, this is my friend Barry. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I probably should have made you, one of the very first in the room. No. But no, I know you're humble, but honestly, I wanted to have this all ready for you. How's it look?
It's awesome.
Yeah?
You did this all by yourself too?
Yeah. There's no contractors involved. It was Miller. It was my friend Pete helped because he's really tall and handy, and it was me and Tony. It was the four of us, and yeah, we threw this together.
Well, we've been watching your podcast. I told you Wayne
love this.
Was going through and said, "Wow, it just makes you stop and click." So it really does look sharp. I'm
Thank
impressed.
you. Yeah, and so now we're officially qualified to be a subcontractor for Wilson & Co.
We have another studio. We've done a few. So.
Oh, actually, that's good to know. Yeah. We can help.
Yeah.
I like that. So Wilson & Co. General Contractors. If you could help our audience, I want to get everybody on the same page with us. What do you guys do?
So we're a commercial general contractor throughout the Southeast, and we specialize mostly in medical. Retail, some industrial, some churches, some of that stuff, but mostly medical is our primary.
You've even done
business.
Post offices, right?
Yeah, we've done quite a few of those over the years. We've done residential early, and then we switched mostly just doing commercial. We don't do anything else at this point.
Good, and I think that's wise.
Yeah.
And niching down and being the expert in your niche makes sense for most businesses. Now, this is ground up for a lot of these too, right? You've got an empty space, and someday there should be a building. You guys handle that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can help them all the way from, site selection, all of that stuff, get them the right architects, engineers, any of that stuff. We're probably the best people to come to because we're trying to help them make business decisions as they go. So, what is this going to cost? What does it look like? What are all the little pieces, changes of use and property selection? There's a lot of rules out there, and we're not the 100% experts. Don't get us wrong. We're going to bring in the experts to help us. So, a civil engineer who's really good at getting changes of use through certain municipalities is really critical. So, who's the best team for this individual? That's really what we're trying to provide.
Got it. So you assemble the Avengers, and then they go and champion the project.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, how many backhoes do you guys have? How many excavators do you guys own? How many tradesmen are on payroll? What does that look like? I already know the answer.
Well, as general contractors, we hire that out. Right. So those are all subcontractors. So we work with site contractors who have all the backhoes, have all that equipment. We have leaders is really what we have. So we have site superintendents, we have project managers, project coordinators, all of those people in-house who manage the project. So really we're just, as general contractors, bringing everybody together, selecting the team, and then managing it for completion. Obviously, we've got the main license to pull the permits for these things, but there are also trades within each of those different, fire alarm, site. All of those guys have to have their own licenses. They're all in almost every trade. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that to me is an interesting distinction between the residential contractor GC and what you guys do, because I know a lot of GCs who are, well, let's call them GCs, you never know, but they may call themselves that, but they're actually a really great finish carpenter who's got the moxie to try to take on a larger project. And yeah, they're going to sub out a whole bunch of other things, but you see them come up with their truck, and they've got their trailer, and they got their stuff, and it's a different experience compared to the way you guys are bringing, I guess, it's just a different professionalism and a different required professionalism based on the scope and scale.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even on a small commercial job, you have a lot more paperwork needs that owners have. So, if you're building a home, you have a guy who's got, a home office, maybe a warehouse space, really doing everything almost himself. Doing some of the work himself, hiring some of the work, and it's really a personal experience.
Yeah.
In commercial, say a post office or a medical, there's just a whole team that has to put the paperwork together. The payroll, the paperwork for a government project is just pretty enormous. So we've got a really strong team in accounting. We've got a really strong team, just putting the paperwork together that is necessary for these clients. So that's probably the biggest difference, because as a general contractor, you can do both residential and commercial. But we've got a larger overhead because we've got to, provide so much more paperwork, so much more stuff than you do on a residential side, right? So, even in spec books and stuff that are contract required, you just don't have that in residential typically. So the cost point to do residential is obviously much less because the overhead is less. So it doesn't translate very well a lot of times. We could give you a price, but for us to put a full-time superintendent on the project, where with residential, a lot of times they're drive-by guys who just pop in, make sure it's being done, plumber did his job, whatever. We really have a guy there the whole time, and he's gonna make sure that, to the best of our ability, we pass the inspections, the guys do the work per plans. That's really why you pay for the additional overhead costs that you wouldn't see on a residential job.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was Wilson & Co. always that way, or was there a time where it started with crews and it started the way more of a residential style and became this, or was it right out the gate, we're commercial GCs and this is how we operate?
So Parks and Amelia Wilson founded it in 1994, so we're 29 years old now, and he worked for some very big general contractors, nationwide companies. So he started it with the mindset that he was going to do commercial work. Primarily was his focus, and that was his experience. But when you start with, a little bit of money and build it like he did, he kind of took whatever he could in the Oviedo area generally. And so he had to put food on the table. He had young daughters, so he really took whatever he could, did a lot of custom homes there, and all that. But then really he got into a situation where to do commercial well, he couldn't also do residential well. And so really pulled back from the residential side. And his experience in big box retail really allowed us to grow pretty rapidly in those first few years, and get out of the residential market. It's just hard to do both well.
Yeah. So. That makes sense. Yeah. And at what point did you come into Wilson & Co.? So I know Parks and Amelia started it in '94. When did you discover Wilson & Co.?
So, it's an interesting story. My parents were missionaries in New Guinea for 40 years or so, which is an awesome upbringing, to be honest. We moved back here to Sanford, Florida, and my parents were on staff at the mission organization here, just back really for health reasons, and they decided that they were going to go back to New Guinea, and I was a high school senior, and I was just kind of helping out, had some odd jobs, worked at Winn-Dixie and some other things, and the mission had a retirement home center there, and I was working there doing physical labor, painting this, helping with that, carrying this for the retirees of missionaries, and they ran out of work. They have a lot of volunteers, and so as soon as that was done, they didn't need some houses finished or whatever. I said, hey, we know this guy in Oviedo who's a commercial general contractor. He'd probably be willing to hire you if you're interested. And so my brother and I, kind of signed up, and I think it was 98, somewhere in there, 97, 98, trying to think back. But so we started working. We were sweeping floors and whatever we could do through that time, again, we were pretty faithful employees, so we would show up on time and didn't have the general drama that some of the guys in the construction field are known for. So, quickly became trusted employees. My brother's a missionary in Africa now, so, he moved on after that first summer, but I stuck around. I went to college in between, but I basically worked either through the summers when I was in college or whatever to be here ever since. So I'm working on however many years that is.
So that's actually really bizarre, frankly, because I meet no one who says I've been with the same company for more than frequently, 10 years? And you're like, whoa, you've been with a company for 10 years? And so you've got, what is that, 25 years?
Yeah, 26, something like that.
Holy cow. And when you started there, you're sweeping the floors. That sounds a little bit, that sounds janitorial, frankly, but were you on work sites?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So did Parks have crews then, or was he? Okay.
So we did, back then we were doing.
By the way, Parks is an actual first name.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So a lot of our residential stuff and whatever, they were going to call me a carpenter, but that was kind of generous. But I learned a lot. I really did. Those guys were very helpful. Started watching, reading plans, doing all that stuff, just really living it. And then, started being the person that the customer would come and talk to when they showed up on the job site. So then next thing you know, the subs are talking to me, and, it started growing slowly as the trusted person on the project. So it really grew from there. So when I did get my degree done, which was in education, ironically.
Okay. It perfectly aligns. Yeah. I see it.
So I didn't really decide this is what I wanted to do. But when I got back, they said, hey, now that you got your degree, why don't you move in the office and work in here full time? They already knew that I would show up to work and all those things. So it was initially supposed to be 3 days a week, but that never happened. I was pretty much in the office from then on. So really just, was taught and just absorbed and watched, how Parks dealt with problems and owners and customers, and then really just started figuring out how to help, really. You know what I mean? What problems are there and how can I help solve it? And so from there, it just really, kept going.
Wow. And so how does Parks solve problems?
That's a good question. Well, again, I think everybody's got a little bit of a different personality when they solve a problem. I'm a little different than Parks. He's one of the smartest people I know. Basically he wants all the information and he can really get to the root of it. If you hand him something, he's going to find a problem with it. He can find it. And, so it's very, very effective with that.
Yeah.
And he's 100%, all gas, no brakes. So he can do a lot of work in a day. And so you're really watching him, kind of his thought process. Okay, if this happens, I'm going to do this, or hey, I see we're losing, time on the schedule, or hey, that's not a fair change order, or whatever that is. Don't use that sub, use this sub. Why would he say that? Well, then you see, okay, that's why he made that decision. So
interesting. All right, so that's a handful of years in, you're promoted, you're educated,
yes,
you're going to the School of Parks.
That's right.
And what I've always found interesting when I met you guys, I was aware that you were just on the edge of a transition, and that transition being that Parks was about to retire, and you were going to move from CEO to CEO owner.
Yes.
And that's a massive transition. That I know there's people watching who go, yeah, I'm working for a business that I could see owning someday. But I guess I've always been the owner, so I don't know what I would say to the boss to say I want to buy your business. I don't know what steps I would take. How did you handle this?
Well, that's a really good question, because I think there are a lot of people in that position. First of all, my advice would have the conversation. They're not just going to look around and be like, I wonder if he wants to, own this someday. Because as they get, further into their career, get closer to retirement, that's, as a business owner, that's part of the conversation. I've built something. I've put a lot of sweat equity. What happens to this business? Do my children want to take it? In his case, his children, weren't as interested in that. Good for me.
Yay!
But they all have very successful careers, done a great job with them. So, this wasn't a necessary step for them. I was really in a good position there, but I had to communicate it. There were other, very good project managers in my same role, during that time. So, really gaining the trust that, if he did hand over the reins, and that takes a while.
I watched some of that transition too. Yeah. I remember him, coming into the office and it's like, I thought you retired, but you're still here and we're still responding to you like you're the boss. and of course, after 25 plus years of that muscle memory, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. No, for sure. Well, and he's got a lot of interest in it, right? Not only with working capital that's in the business, but the value of the company still matters. So it's not like he can really just be hands off. So so getting through that process where again, starting to make decisions, starting to make the calls, and because we're not identical, we're not twins, we don't make the same decisions. Some of it he would disagree with probably, and in some of the decisions he made when I was working for him, although I tried to do my best to execute him as he asked, I probably would have done them differently as well. It's probably the key is you still have to be yourself. You can't, you cannot, Miller can't be Josh Pies, right?
Right.
That's just true. But he can be a really good Miller, right?
That's right. He would look strikingly handsome in my coat.
I asked him to, but
he wouldn't.
I asked him to interview me, but he said.
Wow, I'm being removed already. So no, it's a really interesting point though that the transition, you don't suddenly become the person who had the reins. You have the title and the authority maybe, but you will hopefully run it your way.
Yeah. One of the things I think, and I'd give this advice to anybody who's wanting to run a business or want to be an entrepreneur, is just really read. Read as much as you can. Business books, a lot of books about people who've done it before, who were in a lot of different situations. One of the books that really helped me probably the most was Creative Followership. It's by Jimmy Collins. He's a president of Chick-fil-A. So he worked under Truett Cathy, but as president, and this is before Dan Cathy and some of the other Cathys came along, but really good advice for young guys working for a boss. And a couple of the key points he made was don't compete with your boss. That's not the point. So if you're competing with them for, in Truett in his case was speaking engagements, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, again, that causes friction. And his advice is also do the things your boss doesn't like to do. So if you can find stuff that your boss just really doesn't like, that doesn't get done because he hates doing it, maybe that's the area that you could really make a difference in. So my brother had recommended that book after listening to me and being like, here, you need to read this book. So
that's cool.
Really good, just common sense. He's got a lot of points on really how to be effective. Excellent book. But,
that's awesome. And at what point did you end up reading that? Was that before, during, after the transition?
Before we were really fully into it. And I was getting to the point where, do I start my own business? I mean, what does it look like here? Am I... I've got the training now. How long is he going to want to remain, in charge? And then, where does my future look like? And then, so reading that book really helped me, again, not compete and do some of those other things that I could, really be more effective with.
So this business is a big business. How many employees right now?
We have 26 employees right now.
So this is, it is still a technically small business according to the U.S. government standards, but to Joe Schmo walking the street, this is a big business.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how, and you're under no obligation to talk hard numbers, but when you go to Parks and you say, I want to buy it, he's probably going to go, I know what I pay you. How's that going to work? How do you finance and how do you build the relationship and make the deals to make it an equitable, positive transition for both parties?
That's a great question, right? Because I didn't come to the table with a lot of money or backing or whatever. My parents didn't have a,
missionaries don't go, hey kid, here you go, buy the business.
Yeah. So really, all I could do was kind of buy the business and let the business repay him, right? So he's got to have a lot of faith that I can pull that off, right? Not hit an iceberg, not really do anything stupid.
Yeah.
And that's easy to do in the construction business. There are a lot of icebergs and there's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
Contracts, lawyers, there's all kinds of stuff out there. But we spent a lot of time on it, to be honest with you. Probably a couple advisors really got us to the point. We ended up really making our own kind of hybrid deal. where, just trying to figure out, who's responsible for what. If we hit the iceberg, how does this work? So that can be a little contentious at times. With the goal, the same thing. He wanted to see the business continue. He did not want to see Wilson and Company get absorbed into another company and disappear the minute he walked out the door.
Right.
So that worked in my favor, right? Because I was that opportunity for him. He just had to trust me with his working capital that I could not replace until I had earned money, moving forward. So really, buying the business was a lot about the working capital in construction. We've got to be able to pay people in advance before we get paid in a lot of cases, to get our lien releases and do all those things. So that's probably the most critical point if you're starting a general contracting firm or any contracting firm is just having some working capital. And how do you grow that? How do you not spend it so that you can grow the work? That's probably the biggest mistake I see with subcontractors or others is, they go buy stuff and spend the money, and then they're working, they're always looking for that next check, as opposed to having the working capital to be able to, float through it and still pay the guys on Friday, do all those things that are necessary to keep your good people. So that's probably the hardest transition, is figuring that number out.
So you guys spent a lot of time together. He kept you on because you I would assume were seen not only as effective and a good worker, but also likable. I like hanging out with you. I find that believable. Yeah. So you've got rapport, and I'm wondering how much that long-term rapport, positively and or maybe negatively, because you have rapport and it makes it harder to negotiate. How did that affect that long, protracted conversation?
Well, you got to have those. The conversation has to be long for this type of situation, right? He's not ready to retire, but if you don't have the conversation early, then he's going to find somebody else to do this with, right? So you got to have it, years in advance of really making the transition. That would be true if that's your goal.
How many years?
4 or 5, I would say.
Okay.
They've got to process it in their mind, right? They've pushed this thing as far as they have, and now they're going to be stepping back. And that's hard too. Like, at what point, is he making the decision still? Well, naturally, he's been your boss for 20 years. It's hard to do that. So, really, I think, it really worked out well in our case. We just had dinner last night. Those are good things. Personally, my wife and I. So that's what you want to see, right? The transition past, being able to sit down, talk about the problems. They kind of shake their head a little bit.
So, this is also interesting to me. So with Parks transitioning, I'm hearing a lot of thought leaders right now talk about how entrepreneurs have made a mistake of getting their personal identity entwined with their business. So instead of their personal identity being maybe tied to their personal character, where it's like, I live to positively affect people in a certain way, and for many years I had a tool called my business. Yeah. They become their business. And I want Parks to come on eventually. He can tell his origin story and talk about the other side of this, and then we can actually A/B the stories and see how that goes. But do you have a sense of whether at any point in this he had to work to detach himself from the identity of Wilson & Co.?
Oh, I think that was probably one of the more difficult things for him.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I'm wondering if you played any part in that, because 5 years is a long time, but 5 years out of 30 owning a business is a small fraction of that. So how do you deal with that?
Well, his name's on the business, Wilson & Company. So you don't want him to completely not be associated with, that clean break, the equity he has with customers and with the community is huge. So that's a bad move on our part if he's not somewhat involved. At the same time, you're trying to raise up new leaders within the group of project managers you have. You've met quite a few of them.
Yeah, they're great.
And those guys need some room to be themselves and to go out there and make the deals. So really, there's got to be, but they also know they need to, if they got a real problem, call him. He'll you may not like what he tells you, but he's going to give you some solid advice on the best way to handle it. So, but then stepping back from that, also, it's still letting them move forward, those guys, and let them go negotiate it, right? You can't just take that over. Parks could drive over there and have that meeting with that owner or that sub or whatever, just like that. But that's where that step back has to happen on his side. You're mentoring now. You're having the conversation, telling them what you would probably do in this situation, but then letting them go make their own decision. They heard that. does that fit in how they want to operate this? They know more about the current situation. Sometimes they're going to make the right call, sometimes they're not. But really, that's the hardest transition for him. Now, he's got so much experience, so people are calling him, right? Yeah. Whether that's church organizations that needed, help on, they did an addition without getting a permit. We get those all the time, And so he found a lot of avenue to use his skill set. To this day, he's still, going and inspecting stuff that, hey, I got this problem. So for him, it just was not as focused on Wilson and Company as much. Now, some of the licensing in some of the states he still has for us, we've slowly added him into our stuff. He's on the board of directors. So, there's still some involvement, which is important to us, right?
Yeah.
You can't build something like that and then all of a sudden, no involvement at all. That's just not right. So,
well, yeah, it seems not right from like almost a human moral perspective, but also from that pragmatic side of people expect the name. Yep. It is Wilson and Co. It's not Henderson and Co. And at what point is it Wilson, Henderson, and Pies? That's what I'm wondering.
That's a good question.
It's a really good question.
Where's your money?
Give me a few minutes.
Okay.
I'll make some calls. So one of the things that you were just kind of talking about, you dropped the word mentorship, and it strikes me that there's been a lot of that in the business. And I'll never forget, you said something that I use to this day. You said it years ago to me, that you allow every person in the business enough latitude and authority to hang the business. I mean, they are empowered to go do the full job that they're supposed to do, which has inherent risk. But you've put people in that you trust, which I think is brilliant. And it challenged me when you said that to delegate more and trust more, because I used to say things like, oh, that guy's awesome, and then I find myself doing his job.
Yeah.
And the truth was, I believed he was awesome, but I didn't act that way. So it changed how I act. And so I've always respected Wilson and Co. as a family of people who allow people to rise to the challenge. And could you talk to me about the culture of Wilson and Co.? Because I feel like there's a differentiating factor between your business and other businesses. And also, I guess, and this is a loaded and multi-layered question, is this part of the unique selling proposition for Wilson and Co.? There's other GCs out there. Like, is the people set and the culture part of the secret sauce?
It has to be, right? It has to be, because you can't work with every customer, or else you can't grow, right? So you can't be in charge and be the face of every single thing if you want to grow the business.
Right.
So you have to have people, and you've met our team. They're extremely likable and competent, and they've all got different skill sets. Some of them are really good at one thing and some of the others, so they really feed off each other. We have challenges with personnel like any other business, right? We've had some, even this year we've had some real challenges, and you got to do your best to work through it. Some of the reasons is, my leadership style is a little bit more hands-off. And to that point, I want them to go and try to empower them to go find business, meet people. My job is to provide them with the tools to execute afterwards, whether that's enough people, project coordinators to help them do their projects. But can they go find the business? Can they go create, a revenue stream and a client that, really fits, them and their personality, what they like to do? And can they develop that? Because you can't develop everything yourself. Right. And again, if you interject in a project and in a situation all the time, pretty soon those owners, every time there's a problem, they're calling you direct every single time. And then you can't handle all of this all the time. You don't have enough information to be able to answer the question. I have no idea why the framer is not on your job site today. I'd have to find out, because it's just too much. So you have to give them that latitude. And then if they go to a meeting and they act like they know they're making a deal, hey, I need to get this much extra money, but the owner's like, no, that's too much, and they work a deal out, and then they come back to the office, and I say, no, that's not enough. You need to go back out there. You really pulled the rug out from under them as far as negotiating. Why are they talking to that PM? They should be talking to you.
Right.
So let them do it. It may not be enough. Sometimes you're disappointed. Sometimes you're like, wow, they did way better than I did, or could have done, or would have done. I would have accepted half of that. So you'd be surprised how much better it is, right?
Yeah.
The hard part is when they do make mistakes is not rubbing their nose in it, so to speak, right? You can't.
Right.
You need to pick them up, dust them off, send them back out. The lesson is really, what did we do wrong here? And we just had this conversation yesterday. Wow, we messed that one up. That was a mistake as far as, the type of project, the location, our expertise. Some of the stuff was fine, but some of it just, we need to do better. Next time we don't need to do that again. That's a lesson we don't want to repeat.
So every situation like that is a teachable moment.
You got to be.
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, my education background really helps me look at it from that perspective. I like to do that. Hey, what did we do wrong here? Let's fix it. But those guys will run with their customers. They'll build the relationships with those customers that you can't do, right? And they got to trust them. So people work with who they like and trust, right? Especially when you're in the millions of dollars for projects. So, who do I trust with a couple $1 million? Josh, I trust you, but there's some limits to who you trust, and you've got to empower them to get there, because if they don't, it's a problem. And then really when they feel that, they're going to handle the problems. Otherwise, Friday afternoon something happens, they're like, oh, I'm on a date, I'm sorry the customers, the whole second floor is leaking, but because it's them, it's their relationship, it's their problem. You didn't even hear about it till Monday.
Right.
Wow, you were out there, what happened? So it really does have a lot of benefits.
How's the construction industry right now? I'm watching real estate, and I'm watching residential real estate. I think everybody is, you live in a home, and you have friends who live in homes, and then you got 65 people who sell them, and they're all, rates are up, everything's competitive, nobody's selling, everything's selling. Like I don't know what to listen to anymore. But I'm curious from the GC side of life. I hear rumblings of high material prices, fluctuating material prices, which I'm sure has been a perennial. I mean, how could you not have that every year? Things change. What's the industry like right now?
So it's really been an interesting ride this last, since I really fully took over 5 years ago. So COVID hit, some of those other things. I think the day I was signing the papers, we had a project in Hialeah that had just had, I think, over 100 people had to evacuate from the building. As we're going to sign that afternoon, I was like, I've already hit an iceberg and we haven't even barely signed. So I really had to go with faith and say, you know what, this is,
still gonna happen.
I've worked this hard to get here. Just because, we got real problems today doesn't mean the future won't be bright. So my wife and I were looking at each other like, are we really ready for this? It's going to be a whole new level of responsibility. So back to your question, a lot has happened in the last 5 years that we've had to kind of do. Although even with Parks, he didn't have a COVID year, some of those other things. For us, we were essential workers. We could work right through that, generally speaking. A lot of our customers continued. We had about $5 million of work canceled. We had
which sounds huge to some people because they don't deal with money like that. But what's a semi-normal year for Wilson & Co?
We're in the mid-20s typically.
Okay,
low
so it's
30s.
a lot, but it's not necessarily closed the doors a lot.
Yeah. So mid to upper 20s, low 30s is kind of where we're at typically. And so COVID hits, then the material shortages hit. That was, 22 was our toughest year. We had just a lot, in every case, on every project, we can't get panels, we can't get air conditioning units, we can't get, simple things, And again, it makes sense. We couldn't get toilet paper for a while, right? So, a panel or an RTU is much more complicated, I would think. There's a lot of factors in that. Obviously, China was shut down, so a lot of the stuff that's made there was just a real challenge. So working through that with your client, I mean, you would literally get off a phone with a mad client who can't get an electrical, why can't you answer where the panels are? And then two hours later, another customer with the same, where's my, and these aren't things we make in our garage, right? So yes, I would love to produce this for you, but it is completely outside of our control. Now, we place the order with this information, but you can't get it. That factory is getting blown up by stuff. So that everybody was looking for a solution, right? Well, what are we going to do now? I got to get open. This is money lost for each one of those customers. So in a lot of cases, we're trying, can we switch it to 2 different panels? Where can we get those? Well, you had to be Johnny on the spot with solutions, or you weren't going to do it. I mean, I was buying roofing materials on the side of the road with my credit card. Like, you have it, okay, here's the credit card number. Please, I don't even know if it was worth that. It was just the fact that, we've got a contract, we've got a bond on this job, we have a performance and payment bond that guarantees we're going to be done. We got to get done. So that was just a crazy time. So working through all those challenges and getting to the point we are now, much more stable. So the last 12 months, material pricing has been pretty stable. It's kind of coming down a little bit, but not,
good.
So material prices, if you look at the last 12 months, have basically stayed steady. Now that's 90% more than it was in 2019. So that's still not, so when you talk to an owner now and they built a building with you in 2016, just think double or more of what you paid last time. Just get that in your mind because it is just extremely expensive to build. So yes, it's going to slow because of that. Now, we kind of really judge it based off the architects we work with. What's their workflow? How quickly are they getting us stuff? What is in their pipeline? Because that's really our pipeline, right? If they're designing it, likely it's going to get built, right? You spend a couple $100,000 developing a set of plans, you're probably going to move forward. But we've had quite a few who said no, it just didn't. The math didn't work for them. So that's probably the bigger challenge. Is what does the future hold with the overall economy?
So when material prices are up like that, do people start making different decisions on like, okay, I'm going to do a build out and a rehab on something that's already standing, so that they cut out the price of the walls, they cut out the price of the roof, and they're just working indoors? Yeah.
So we would do a lot more ground up, as you said, full development, probably up until the last downturn. We primarily only did that. We did not do any interior build outs. Since the last downturn, we really started doing a lot, specifically in the medical field. That's where we really did the build outs. And all over the Southeast, we just finished a job in Vegas. We've got a project in Albany, Georgia. So those are medical clients who have a specific need, mostly about getting open quickly. And so that's really kind of the niche we've gone into. So all of them are making different decisions, right? What they approved in capital and end of last year for 2023, or in this case for 2024, well, all of that got burned up pretty quickly last year, right? So because prices just kept going up. So in Florida, the labor market's still crazy. So you can get pricing from subs. It's just getting that performance. Can they get enough guys there to do it? So we do wish for a little, softer market. I know I hate to say that, but to be able to perform well, you want to have subs who are, eager to get to your job site, eager to make the money on that job, and eager to get going, rather than, hey, I gave you this price, but I'm too busy. Like, oh, what am I going to do now? And then you're not using your A team, so you're using subs or whatever that are not quite what you would want to provide the level of service we're trying to provide.
How do you make up for that then? Is that just in increased oversight?
Yeah, so that's why you have to really have a site supervisor or superintendent on the job site to make sure. Because otherwise, if you hire good subs, do you really need to have somebody there babysitting? No, they're good. They're going to get it right. They're going to predict per plans. They're going to do all that. That's a wasted cost to an owner. But in the reality is that we do have to make sure that it's going to pass the inspection and that it is put in per plans. If they bury the pipe and it's not right, it's a problem. So at least documenting that, making sure that somebody's got an eye on it, is really why we would spend, or an owner would have to spend that extra money to have somebody there on that project the whole time. Now, most of them are big enough where that cost is not as huge as it would, say, for a home or something like that. But
so when you've got a construction manager or project manager on site, it seems like they need to understand at a pretty intimate level almost every trade out there in order to make sure that, maybe your B+ player is operating at an A status. They can, you can call somebody to a higher order if you're a good coach who knows the game. How are you finding these people to be able to handle that type of a calling right now?
Well, general contracting is so general, right? So we hire all of these trades. So are we a fire alarm expert? No, we couldn't. We know what the plans show, but technically, plumbing. Again, they have enough experience, but they don't. They could probably plumb it, but it probably wouldn't pass inspection. There'd be something technical there that would not be quite right, because they don't do it every day. They see it as part of their project every time, but you can't be an expert in all that stuff. So when we hire people, it's like, okay, relax. You can't be an expert in all this. I don't know the answer to half of the questions I get asked. No, we can figure it out. There's somebody on our team who probably knows this answer. Hey, Wayne or Rick or some of those guys, you know, what this just came up. What's the answer to this? And that's where they've really got to lean on each other, because there are, you know, some of our superintendents are much more versed in site parking lots, you know, asphalt, concrete. So, you know, and then there's guys who are, you know, either came from a roofing background, or we've got, you know, Dave was in air conditioning. So, hey, Dave, does this make sense? So you've got to really rely on each other, because you can't know it all in this business, right? Now, if you were a fire alarm subcontractor, you probably should know a whole lot about fire alarm systems, right?
God help us, you should.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that makes sense for him to be an expert.
Yeah.
But in general contracting, you can't be an expert in each of those trades, and especially in commercial, where the systems are different. You know, what's being called for is completely different brands, different applications, you know, different types of air conditioning systems. You know, residential split system is completely different than a, you know, full VAV, you know, controlled environment that you'd have in a lot of medical facilities. So it's just a completely different ballgame. So you can't be an expert on both of those. You can know a lot, but you can't be an expert on all.
So this goes back to culture then, because if everybody's leaning on each other, and we know Dave knows AC and maybe Wayne knows, you know, asphalt and parking lots, which, by the way, you guys did a great job on that one church in Kissimmee. The exterior looks awesome. So it does come back to culture, and there's a familiarity that I've felt, and you know, full disclosure, I've had the opportunity to speak more than once at their offices, and sometimes I just pop in and hang out.
He's been a great partner, for sure.
Thank you. And so, but I get to experience the rapport that they have, and it seems genuine, and it doesn't happen overnight. So I'm wondering what types of things, what behaviors do you, and maybe they started with parks, what are in place to make sure that everybody is so, I wouldn't call it in lockstep, because they're all doing different things, but boy, are they tight.
You know, it's interesting, because I don't know really how we've gotten to the point where we've had such a good team, right? Obviously, Wayne been here just almost as long as I have. Several of the others have been, you know, with us a long time. But some of the, you know, the younger guys that have come in along the way, I mean, you know, Dave rang the bell. He had worked for a company that we had done business with, liked our approach, moved to Orlando and saw our sign and walked in. What a great, you know. So that was not brilliance on our part, right? That was just really how we behaved as a company, you know, had attracted him to working with us. And so that's a tough one. It's hard to hire people. It just is. And even if
but once they're in, there's a behavior that is like, so it was so attractive it got Dave to say hi. Now he's in, and he's very clearly grafted into the culture. How does that grafting happen? How does the culture keep going? Like, is there anything deliberate, or is it just really cool dudes and dudes?
That's the key. You know, those guys would be successful anywhere, right?
Got it.
Really keeping them on the same team. Hey, if we all do well, it's exponentially better for all of us, right?
Yeah.
If you're the only one who does well this year, and the others do poorly or not as well,
it's going to hold you back.
Yeah, it's going to hold everybody back. But you're going to get farther if the team's getting farther. But that is the hardest thing, is the people, and you know, again, miscommunications, how emails go back and forth, you know, strong personalities, you name it. That's the hardest part. And you know when you got it wrong, and we've had it wrong before, and so you really find out who also is part of the solution, and when things aren't going, like who's trying to, you know, find the middle ground, who's trying to find the solution, who's taking some leadership here, and you know, trying to resolve a interpersonal problem within the group. Those guys are, you know, priceless, right? So really, those guys are setting the culture. They have to be part of it, or else, you know, they're just showing up for work every day, and you don't want that.
Right. That's interesting. What's next for Wilson & Co.? I mean, what's your vision for the next 5 years?
Well, I mean, with a strong team, you have to grow in order to provide opportunities for those guys who have the potential to grow, right?
So this is you sense a growth mandate.
You have to, because they'll leave if you can't grow. If they have the potential to grow, you have to grow with them. There has to be the steps where they're managing and growing what they're able to do, right? So
I like this, so I want to stay here for a second. I hear other owners say, no, this is a good size. I'm happy here. Or we're going to stay here. And I hear other people go, if you're not growing, you're dying. And this is the first time I've actually heard an articulation that aligns well with the "if you're not growing, you're dying" thing. And because I've heard most people align that with, if you're not growing, you're dying because somebody else is going to eat your lunch. But I've never heard it tied to the quality and growth potential of the people in the business who are the business.
Yes.
When did you realize that, and why did you realize that?
I think being somebody who is in the business and trying to grow, realizing that, hey, if there's a ceiling here and this is where I stop and no more responsibility comes my way, no more opportunities to, make decisions and develop some of the stuff that would really be my boss's purview. If I don't find room to grow, I'm going to move somewhere else, right? So, especially young, men and women who've got a college education, have decided to do this as a career, have the licenses, have the potential, when it gets to here and there's nobody looking for this to get to a better place for them to have more space to spread their wings, it's going to be hard to keep them.
So if you don't create the space for them to move up, they necessarily, by their quality and their moxie, have to move out.
Yeah. They want to know if they can hire people. They want to know, they want to manage that contract. They want to manage that stuff. So if your ideal is trying to move it up, now it's hard, right? Because again, it's a lot of that's outside of your control. So if you really got to control everything down to the minute details and not kind of want to be able to let it go and like we talked about, let them hang the business in so many words. It's just difficult. So you got to be able to let go, right, and let them do it. So let them hire people, let them manage the contract, let them decide whether or not they're going to accept those terms on this contract or not. I may not want to do that. I think it's foolish, but how are they going to learn, and how do they feel like they're making decisions unless you let them make a decision, right?
Right. They don't actually, if they feel like it and then they find out they didn't, that's game over.
Yeah. If you come in and swoop in, take over, it becomes a real challenge. Now, that's how it's working for us. Every business is different. Ours is obviously a unique one, but that's kind of how we've gotten to where we are now. Post Parks's, tenure as the president, now it's a little. That's kind of how I've been going forward. So we'll see.
It's interesting though, because we had Steve Gunter on from the Tap Room at Dubsdread. Do you know Steve?
That one.
Yeah, it's a good one, right? Yeah, and his clarity on people and how he incentivizes the team to chase goals with bonus structure, and there's growth opportunity. I mean, you look at a server, you're like, oh, they're a server. There's, and maybe they're stuck at server, maybe they have, weights, host on their mind. I mean, you can move a little bit, but their growth is largely in performance. And so he's incentivized and given a lot of grace and latitude too, where it's like, hey, you don't think the order went well and the experience went well? Comp them their meal. Go ahead and give them the free dessert. Do whatever you got to do to make them happy. We want them to come back. And that's a restaurant business. But the philosophy isn't quite dissimilar, really. So I wonder if successful entrepreneurs like the both of you have really just arrived at a clarity that it's not about you, it's about them being the employees who are outstanding and capable.
Yeah.
I know that's a stumbling block for a lot of people. And it took 25 years of entrepreneurial maturity for me to start stumbling on that myself. So I know it's needed, and I think that's a lesson for our audience that if you're not obsessed about your people yet, you're not ready for your success.
Or it's going to die when you stop working hard.
Right.
And do you really want to do all this work and have it die? No.
You
want to see it continue. You want to see that next generation of leaders move up. You got to get a little bit out of the way in some terms to be able to allow that growth for them. But that's really, the key ingredient. And training people again. There's
that's expensive.
It's hard. It's disappointing. You've given them opportunities. Maybe they got 20 more grand moving over here, or whatever that conversation is. Mm-hmm. That's a shame. So you've got to be able to provide a way forward for them. If they are worth it, they're gonna need to grow, and you can't be in the way of that. If you are, it's a real challenge. And we've got projects, say it's $1 million, 500,000, 2 million, whatever how many people, they've got to be able to go make their customer happy to the best of their ability, and for that customer to call again, right? Or to recommend you again, or any of those conversations. So you've got to really give them the latitude to be able to do that, because it's similar to a restaurant, serving somebody every week as opposed to once.
Right.
That's a problem. Same with us. If that customer is going to build again and it's not us, that's a missed opportunity. So, we've got to stay on top of that and build client satisfaction, which is really our tagline. Look, at the end of the day, that's what we got to try to do. Now, is that perfect? No. We do make mistakes. No business, doesn't. I think any entrepreneur knows some of them just weren't good jobs. But your goal is to do that and to have those repeat customers. That's where it's really at for us.
You've been very open about the idea that there's the human element and we can make mistakes. And I think there's a lot of businesses that want to have the perception that there's flawlessness in our system. And I'm curious if you could riff on, and of course, I'm the first person to admit that, like when John Maxwell said, I either win or I learn. And, I live that, and I get it, and I think we're on the same page. But you seem so comfortable with it. How does that play internally, but also when it comes to customer perception? Like your clients may see this. I hope they do, and I think they would be very happy with what you've said so far, which is great. But if you could just kind of go over this familiarity and comfortable attitude when it comes to the idea of imperfection, how does that serve you?
Well, in construction and general contracting, it's one of those kind of wild west businesses in some ways. I don't know of a lot of businesses where somebody can come in, walk in my office and be like, "Hey, we just lost 50,000. Estimate was messed up. Got the wrong spec. Made a mistake. No wonder we got the job." That kind of stuff. What do we do from here? See, that stuff doesn't. Early, it's shortness of breath. You're kind of like, "Oh my goodness, are we going to do this?" You learn pretty quickly that the phone call when it rings and the other stuff. I don't talk to my project managers every day, and some of them work from home, and when they call, sometimes you can tell in the tone that whatever it is probably not going to be good, and it's probably either going to be, unsatisfied customer, didn't pass the inspection, can't be open, whatever that is, or we just lost a bunch of money. We're going to have to replace the subcontractor. They're not performing. Well, that costs money. That's just a mess. So there's not too many businesses where that can happen. I think I'd have a harder time now that I've done it for a while with a business that, you kind of slowly see a creeping of less revenue and more cost, and, one change in, minimum wage would really make a big difference, because we get a redo almost, that job went bad. Well, we got another one for the next 8 months. We're going to do it again. We get to redo this and try to learn from the last one, right? So it's not like a restaurant concept that didn't work. You're like, well, the whole thing implodes and we're going to relearn our lesson, but it's with a new company. We get it kind of project to project, so we can adjust a little easier. So in that case, it's a little easier to stomach. Like, okay, well, that one, we can write that project down a little bit as far as profit goes, and we got to learn our lessons, whether that's not that customer again, okay, or that type of work, or you really learn who you work for matters. Like, who your customer is really, really matters. You got to find people who know what they're doing and have a plan. And when you're working with people who are experimenting on their new business, you're part of the experiment. And that can be pretty lesson filled, should I say, for everybody. So who you work for, who those people are, their character. Again, when, just like us, when things go bad, how are we going to behave? When we're losing money, how are we going to behave, right? Are we going to change our approach? Are we going to not build client satisfaction anymore? Or when it's all perfect, then we're good and we build client satisfaction. But when it goes bad, then we have a bad attitude and we're trying to do that. So really, we got to watch that side of the fence more. So similar with an owner, when they get bad news, and some of the bad news they get may not be from the contractor, it may be from the code change or the fire marshal or whatever that is, that all of a sudden adds a large cost to this project, well, how do they behave in that conversation, right? Are they develop? If they're a developer, have they done enough of this to realize that this happens, right?
Yeah.
And now
how do you choose? I mean, you're saying no to projects, I'm hearing.
You have to.
Okay, and so when you're saying no to projects, like what are those red flags where you're like, oh yeah, you're the third rail buddy, I'm walking?
Well, I think it's when, one red flag would be somebody who wants to mark up the contract as excessively, right? Like all these kinds of things. Like if you don't get done, you're going to get, this is going to happen. And, that's the tendency of a lot of times, they want it in their favor. Now, the standard contract for AIAs is really pretty much universally accepted. Sure, there's some stuff we would like to mark up in that and put in our favor, but if it's really if they're looking for a real one-sided contract, they probably need to go find somebody else, right? Even if we spend a lot of time and effort and money to get to this point, that's a red flag, especially if they do it at the last minute. We're buddies until, oh, by the way, we want X, and you get penalized X for not getting done on time. Well, okay. So you wanted me to cut the price and get cheaper and figure out all these cost savings, which a lot of times reduces the quality of the subcontractor to get there because they're going to have less money to operate and do a good job. You're asking us to do all that, and now you're going to tell us you want all this as well.
Right.
That looks like we gave, and now you're going to punish us if we do bad. So that's a red flag in our book.
Got it.
Like we need to look at our whole card. Can we survive without this? We're going to share them with the competition.
We're going to share them with the competition. That is the most polite I've heard in a long time. I said it for you. You don't have to go there.
Turning into a contractor.
Well, I have a background in this. It's all. I'm kind of glad to be done.
Yeah.
It's a tough business.
Yeah, it's competitive. I mean,
yep.
Probably 1,000 GCs in Orlando, right? So,
yeah, I would imagine. So. Yeah. Cool. You've got a lot of wisdom in this, and I guess one of the things that I'd be just really interested in wrapping this conversation up with is, now you're the boss, and you own the business, and it seems to be going well. And you said that you've got kind of this hands-off approach to managing people, and I'm just wondering, could you give us a glimpse into either a day in or a week in the life of how you're operating, so that somebody else who really wants to live a life where they're empowering their employees and giving them some latitude, is there a way of existing that you've unlocked for yourself that might have some analogy or instruction for somebody who wants to kind of take your tone to their leadership?
I guess it's probably selfish, but I like to, be hands off for selfish reasons. That frees up my schedule.
Sure. Because
if I don't have to micromanage, they're bidding a $4 million job right now. I'm not there. I have no idea what they're going to send. I saw a little bit of it, but you got to trust them to do it. But that allows me to come visit with you, Josh, and eat Cecil's. So
yeah, we're doing barbecue. It's required. Okay.
So if you micromanage everything to that level, you've got to be so much more engaged in the business. So that's really a selfish decision for me. Yeah. I want to be able to break away a little bit here. Sometimes with family needs, that's maybe not what I really want to do, but we've got teenage sons, and
Sure.
we've got a life to live and family we've got to deal with. So that's kind of a selfish reason to be able to do it. So I don't do a lot of meetings. I mean, we have obviously meetings. I meet with customers and all that stuff, but if I put myself out first in they've then customer who has a big contract with us expecting to talk to me, right?
Yeah.
And now my past customers that when I was a project manager, they still call me, that's still the relationship. They're going to trust me, and that's just the way it is. But the new customers, they really need to trust the other guys. If I want to have some semblance of being able to not be there every day, and again, I'm mostly there every day, but I want to have the freedom to do it. So really, it's what do I want it to look like, which is some freedom for me, but also for our project managers. That's why we want them to have project coordinators and people in the office who knows the project and can back them up. So when they're on vacation or the project just doesn't stop, the paperwork still happens, they know where it is in the file, we can still manage through it, and the support for the guys in the field when they call the office is the same person they just talked to. Hey, get me this, can I get whatever that is, I need to order some more of this. There's somebody there taking care of it for them so that they can go on vacation, because otherwise you're calling me, I'm like, I don't know where that is in here, and I'm not as good a backup for that type of stuff. So you got to for their own quality of life, you're trying to provide that as well. So same for me. So that's really what my day looks like, is trying to figure out ways to do that.
That's amazing. It's a good way of living. Yeah. And I know you're accessible too. Like if your team needs you, you're there.
Oh yeah. I mean, you have to be, especially because when there's bad problems, it's shared as a company, right? What are we going to do? Like, anybody got an answer to this? What do we do now? Because some of them may have a relationship. It's amazing. If you have good relationships, like, I know to call. If there's videography, if there's anything like that, we'll call Josh. Similar in the contracting. One sub may not have done it right, and you really don't know why. But there's an expert. You've worked with them before. Hey, what's happened? You got to rely on them. So you want to be there for your guys all the time, but also let them go make decisions. Because if they're calling you for every decision, you're not going to have any time. Right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, so many owners end up devoting the 80 hours a week. They lose all the other important stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you buy, if I'm making the decisions on the new iPhones we have to buy, and somebody else isn't saying, hey, this is what I think we should do. I think we should do this. One of the best books on that is Turn the Ship Around. David Marquette. It's a submarine captain who turned the worst submarine in the Pacific Fleet into the best, and basically he did it by pushing the leadership down, where they told him what they were going to do. This is what I'm going to do. I think it's I intend to take the ship down whatever over this way, and all he did was try to keep them off the rocks, is basically how I put it. So a little rudder a long way from the rocks is better than a lot of rudder on the rocks. So it was a game-changing book for me, to be like, okay, that I like he's not running around the ship with putting out every fire, because he's allowed his team to do their job and delegated that authority. So that's probably how we got here, as far as my leadership style, that book. That's
amazing. So if you have a business and you're like, I have people and I don't think I'm doing it right, I have an assignment for you. All right. And this is homework. You're stuck with it. You have to do it if you care about yourself and your people. You're going to watch this episode twice. You're going to watch this episode twice and listen to Barry's wisdom about how Wilson & Co. is operating and allowing their people to be. Then you're going to go listen to the Steve Gunter episode with Taproom at Dub's Dread and get the wisdom there as well. They're both doing the same thing in two very different industries. This is not general contracting specific. Barry, I can't thank you enough for hanging out with me. This is the type of stuff that gives me life, gives me energy, because I've learned a new way of thinking about how to do something in my business. And the theme on almost every one of these episodes, if you've been keeping track, is take care of your people. Take care of your people, give them room to grow. I just learned that in a new way. I'm hearing it in a new way for the first time. Give them room to grow or they'll go. So if you care about them, you must grow your business. There's no option. And the next episode on Bootstrapped Unicorns, I don't even know what it is, because traditionally somebody else tells me, hey, we got this lined up, and then I show up and it's awesome. And so you're going to join me. And if you're not in the Bootstrapped Unicorns group on Facebook, we're Bootstrapped Unicorns, the entrepreneurship and marketing private group. And if you have business, or let's just say an entrepreneurial bone in your life, you can join. It's free. I'm selling nothing in there. We're there to help each other grow. Barry, are you a Facebooker?
I'm not.
We need to fix that because I want you in the group.
Okay.
Do I have to set up your own Facebook?
No.
Do you have an account?
I can use my wife's. Can I use my wife's?
Yeah, just let us know.
Be cool enough?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. As long as you're hacking her phone every once in a while and actually joining.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Barry's going to find his way in there. If you find Mrs. Henderson in there, it's actually Barry. And I'm Josh Pies. I'm the chief attention getter here at C47 Films. Always grateful for your attention, and I can't wait to see you with us at the next episode.